Welcome to the Front Row Back Row podcast presented by Physiogrowth. We're your hosts, Brian, who scaled a PT practice from the trunk of his car to 6 locations, and Owen, who helped lead an 8-figure exit and now runs a cash-based PT practice. This show is real conversations from owners actively building with what's working right now. Hey guys, real quick, we are running a patient acquisition webinar. If you are interested, go to physio-growth.com. Now, on to the show. All right, and now we are hitting part 5, the final part of our hiring series. And this, if you haven't seen the previous 4 parts, go back and look at them. But we took you through everything from realizing you need a new hire to finding that hire, making sure they come into your business, and then onboarding them correctly. And now we're going to be talking about how to make it so you're not constantly trying to hire. So this is an episode that really focuses on building a clinic, building a company, building a vibe that retains good therapists, keeps them motivated, and makes it so that you can compete on everything else. And then hopefully you can compete on price if you get bigger, right? And you grow. The clinics that I've been in, and I've been in a lot. I was a regional director. We sold it for 8 figures. Had a lot of successful clinics. We had some dud clinics. And the big difference was the managers and the directors knew how to keep everyone happy. They didn't lose people. They kept staff for 7, 8, 9 years, happy as a clam. Other ones who didn't know it, they were hiring all the time. Those clinics are struggling. So today we're going to go over how to build a team that stays. And hopefully this is the big solve to any hiring issues.
Yeah, I totally agree. I like this. We have show notes here for us to kind of go off of. And I love the first opening one is for those that Owen talked about from series 1, episode 1 to 4 on this series. The show notes I have here is this is where hiring series would have stopped. Yours shouldn't. Meaning this is all about retaining those people. And a lot of it is you've just hired them. How do you make sure they stay? And how do you make sure they stick around and grow with you and expand? And that's what we're going to talk all about. So I think that's awesome.
Well, and it's the big elephant in the room, right? If I'm trying to like get people to listen to my podcast episodes or follow my Facebook posts or LinkedIn or whatever, right? I am going to say the stuff that makes people, raise their pitchforks and torches and say, "Yeah, screw that guy," right? And you say things that you don't want to offend that person, right? So you want this person to say like, "Oh, you're everyone else is wrong and I'm correct and this guy believes in me and it must be because they're not giving us enough money or it must be because there's no, the onboarding was crap and all that." Really what it comes down to is, if an owner is saying that and saying, "Oh, these, lazy ass PTs and they want is money and all that stuff." No, dude, it's just because you don't know how to create a good culture and a good clinic.
Totally.
That's it, right? Just kind of like how people are like, "Well, my cash pay clinic isn't really succeeding much, and I haven't really been able to grow in the past." Well, yeah, you didn't go all in, and you're probably a shit PT, so people are leaving, right? But you don't write that on a Facebook post. You don't write that on a, whatever LinkedIn post. You say, "Oh, yes, it must be market forces." Like, yeah, but we're all under the same market forces. So what's your next excuse, right? And this
Yeah.
is what I say when it comes to managers is that "Oh, everyone's leaving and it must be this." No, dude, it's you don't know how to lead, right? And you don't know how to make it so that there's a culture and people can identify with that. And they're like, "Dude, that's cool. I'll pick up your patient if you need to leave," or, "Oh, I'll stay an extra hour for this." Those little differences that make a clinic run are mass the difference between someone getting acquired and someone having to sell in duress.
100%. And I think, Owen, one thing that I'm constantly reminded about when we're also trying to create leaders, right? We're in a position where you're trying to create leaders, and I think it's a huge part of it that's, again, actually not on our notes here. Over communicating is never a bad thing.
Yeah.
Communication is so essential, and it's just a constant thing that you're hearing. Even now I was in a meeting with 2 of my people today, and one of my guys is trying to step into a leadership role, and it's something he's like, "I've never done this before," and I go, "I get it. That's why you got a long leash with me, my man. Like he's been with me for a long time. He's great. He does a good job at what he does, and now he wants to takes that next step." And I said, "This part's hard." And the biggest thing he's recognizing is he's like, "I need to over communicate. I need to make sure I'm communicating
Mhm.
more and to make sure I'm talking to my people because it's easy to blame, like kind of what you're talking about, blaming other things, other outside factors. Oh, this is this is caused because of this problem. This is happening because of this thing. Yeah, you know what's great? Let's communicate. Let's talk. Let's have difficult conversations at times. Let's put on meetings that otherwise we wouldn't. Like if you're having a problem, that means again, we've talked about this in leadership books. Like one of my favorite books is Extreme Ownership, and we had it happen last week where our partnership. I was chatting, and I was like, let me just bounce this off somebody, off of my partner, and he was like, dude, I kind of get it, and like think about extreme ownership. Like it sounds like this needs to happen from the top and be better. And it's like,
Mhm.
cool. Let's take a step back. Let's approach it from this point of view. Like here's what I think
Yeah.
would be better, and
That
it's just
that tran that transparency is massive. And
totally.
I found that if you're and again, in physical therapy, you're dealing with highly educated workers. You're not dealing with someone who, isn't passionate about their job, hopefully, right?
Yeah.
Um, so it's almost, kind of insulting if you aren't sitting there and saying, like, oh yeah, I screwed up. I read this wrong. Right. And I thought this is how we should do it, but it's not. So let's problem solve together and figure this out. Now, are they going to have final say? No. Right. But you want to make sure that like they feel they're part of that company's growth. They're part of the leadership. They had some skin in the game in what their day to day is going to be like and how their patients, because it's their patients, they are the treating clinician, how their patients are going to be supported by your company. Right. So, like, that was always the culture that we felt helped to prevent burnout because we knew real early we can't compete on price with some of these places, right? The guys who get, accelerated reimbursement, the work comp, the hospital chains, right? But we also knew there wasn't a big delta. Like, new grads make 80K. The most experienced person in outpatient ortho in Arizona makes like 110 if they're not a leader. So, I mean, a 30 grand a year delta is big, but it's not life changing.
Yeah.
So we knew we had to win on all the other stuff. So I know you guys have, we did this, in the companies that I work for too, but you guys have career ladders, right? And you guys have not just you're relying on one director to be a good, you know, mouthpiece for your culture and, you know, conveying purpose to your PTs. But you guys have structured ladders that are allow PTs to not just be, okay, you're a PT with more money, or if they want to be in leadership growth. So do you want to go into like kind of how you use that to help kind of keep your staff engaged and keep them like aspiring to the next thing?
Yeah, I mean, I think one thing I want to highlight before I jump into that too is something that Owen talked about is that delta. I'm even noticed it shrunk from like 90K to 110K. I had somebody literally come up to me the other day and was like, "Hey, I heard so and so got offered blah blah blah," and I was like, "No, they didn't." I was like, "Number one,
Yeah,
no, they didn't," and number two, they're just because they're talking about it doesn't mean they got it. And the reality is like that's what you're dealing with in physical therapy is like a 20K difference, which like that's if you're a new grad or if you're like an OCS, SCS trained sports resident PT with multiple years of experience. Like it's kind of wild when you think about it. Like the reality of what's happening in physical therapy is the experience doesn't get you jumped up to some massive salary. It just doesn't happen.
yeah,
Um, so a lot of how we do it to kind of feed into what you're building is around how their leadership impacts the business, right? So like
mhm,
if you're a staff physical therapist, like you can make in that range, like that's totally normal. And then as a senior physical therapist, like same thing. Then when you start really moving up into that clinical director, like that clinical director, now you're responsible for several other people. You're running meetings, you're taking stuff off my plate as an owner, you're trying to build within one location. And so by being in that clinical, you know, position, you're actually able to influence the business and how it expands and grows. And so now what we can do is we can tie your salary towards the performance of the overall clinic, right?
mhm,
So again, no one wants to take pay cuts, but the reality is if the clinic just treadmills, well, guess what? Like your salary sort of stays the same, right? If
yeah,
you get to a level where you're like, hey, now I'm making this, I'm the clinical director, and it's a lot of work, got it. But like, are you really moving the needle? Or is that,
mhm,
something that's not happening? And like, that's also possible. Then regional director is more of the aspect of now I'm going to do it for multiple clinical directors. So now I'm going to have the clinical directors reach for me and I'm going to help coach them on leadership and how they can grow their clinics. And so that regional director is also going to be obviously bonused on the way that their regions grow, right? And how that
mhm.
works. And then yeah, then partners are
So
obviously a whole other ballgame. But that's usually how the structure works to a certain degree.
that's the managerial one, right? So if you get somebody who says, "Yeah, I want to run a clinic someday," all that, but then The other thing that I think is interesting is when you talk about clinical ladders, right? Where somebody
Yeah.
comes to you and says, I just want to treat patients, bro, and I want to do it as best as I possibly can. That's what I went to school for. A lot of managers are stuck because you get reimbursed the exact same amount if you're a new grad or if you've had 30 years experience. It's not like any other business in the world where people will pay a higher per hour rate for experience. So what do you do for that person, right? You can't give them more money. I mean, you can, you should, if they're with the company, you should give them yearly raises and you should, have some level of like paying for like an OCS or whatever it is, right? But then after that, I mean, what do you have? And I think the cool thing now, because I've been in my own cash practice now for 3 years, and I was in more, dinosaur type companies before that. But I would love to see something where it's like, okay, if you do a webinar, right, on pelvic floor, and we get, you know, 50 patients from it, right, through our social media, you can affect all these people. You can bring them in. You can help us. You can show off your clinical expertise, get more, exposure in the research and clinical realm. Oh, and by the way, we'll give you like 20% of what we bring in, right? Something like that where that wasn't open 10 years ago. There was no patient acquisition outside of yes doctor, no doctor, right? So it was our biggest struggle when I was with the company when I was over 6 clinics in a 25 clinic company. Our biggest struggle is what do we say to the person who's wants to be the clinical education coordinator, right? Okay, well, there's one of them, and she's been in that role for 20 years. What are we going to do with the other people,
Yeah.
right? Um, so I think that's evolving. I mean, I don't know what's out there, what's happening for that, but I mean, that's if you were to ask me what should we do today, I'd be pumping some way of making it so that it's some revenue generation, but based on their expertise, not based on their ability to manage people.
Well, and I think what you're explaining that I think makes a lot of sense is more in that senior PT realm, right?
Yeah.
Because I think what's
Yep.
what's important is, and I think this is another thing that we've done is we've created other paths and avenues. Because what I just talked about, like the staff PT to the senior PT to the clinical director to regional director, like that might not be in everybody's like interest. Like there's a lot of
Yeah.
people who are like, I'm not really interested in the business side, but I am really interested in pelvic floor, or I am really
Mhm.
interested in
Ice hockey
bringing the
players.
bringing in
Yeah.
students, right? And
Oh, there you
being
go.
being
Yeah.
that's a massive one, right? Being involved in like I'm interested in fitness stuff, right? Like there's all sorts
Mhm.
of different components to that. So like that senior, I think that's a monster piece of it is bringing in the PT side where ultimately what ends up happening is um I guess for me, the aspect is you want to be able to create systems around your personnel.
Mhm.
I'm a big believer in I think a reason why in sports, like coaches can do really well is they look at their kid, look at their athletes and they go, okay, this is how we're going to run our offense. This is how we're going to run our defense. This is how we're going to run our team. So the reality is, if you look at the people you've got and you're like, this is what I can do and this is how we build, like that's a really good way to do it.
Yeah.
And by the way, PTs love that because you're being employee centric. So versus, hey, here's a bunch of my patients. Like, do you want to treat these people? Now, say you're in a position where, we have somebody on our calls that he is very much treating a very specific niche of people, and that's only going to continue to expand. Perfect. Then what we're going to do is we're going to stick, then you got to just find more PTs that fit that niche because you're going to do really well. And that's
Are you
awesome.
talking about our mentorship calls for
That is,
physio-growth.com?
that is nice. I love it. Fantastic. You pulled a me. I like that.
Ad read, baby.
Yeah,
Uh,
exactly.
well, so this is funny because right before we sold, we were really looking, and the company that we sold to, I don't know we basically got pushed into whatever their sort of retention program was. But we were investigating like increased clinical education budget as you become like a junior PT, senior PT, whatever it comes up, PT level one, two, three, whatever it is, right? It would be things like we comped your APTA and section membership, right? We would send you to the annual meetings. We would cover your CSM, things like that, that are, yeah, they're financial, but they're also really building your street cred as a physical therapy company. And as we were trying to sell, and I mean, if anybody listening to this has been through a selling process, the major goal is to keep everything as predictable as possible before you sell. So the last thing our owner wanted to do was change anything and spend more money on it. But this was something that really was received well. It's just I don't think it ever created. But this is, I mean, that's a big level, right? And I mean, we even had the salary, I think, in the new company. One of the people who used to work under me, she's like 10, 20 hours a week of treating. The other 20 is she is going to every single clinic and teaching, right? And
Yeah.
she's the onboarding for everybody and all that. Which you can take that hit when you're bigger, right?
Well,
Smaller, you may have to do it more with like the budgeting and stuff.
here's what I would say, right? Like again, we just talked about that delta being somewhere between 90 and 110K, right? The
Yeah.
reality is, like I have PTs that come in that are like, I really want to build this aspect, or I really want to build that aspect of the business, right? Or not even the business. I want to focus on this thing. Cool. Like, then let's do it. The reality
Yeah.
is, what's great
Your
about
people are
this.
your business. Your people are your business.
We are. I remember talking about this with a client one time. It was a patient of mine, and he
Yeah.
goes, "Wow, this like," he goes, "This is a cool business." He was like, "But it's very, very like people driven. Like you, like he's like
Uh-huh.
almost." He said it almost negatively in the way of like it's if your
Inefficient.
if well, no, he pointed it out. He goes, "If your people aren't good, like your business isn't going to be good." And the
Mhm.
reality of
Yeah.
the situation is, if you can create physical therapists and more so employees that want to win with you, I mean, all day, man. We'll pay them more money all day because the reality is they're going to get busier. They're going to be
Yeah.
doing the things. They're not going to complain. And quite frankly, they're going to create the culture that the people behind them are going to do the exact same thing. And so
Yeah.
the reality is like paying them more money is not going to be something that hurts you. I mean, look, guys, the reality of why people get paid less in physical therapy initially out of the gate is because as an owner, a lot of people are nervous that they're going to be a deadbeat physical therapist. They're not going to try and get themselves busy and they're just going to sit back on the sidelines. And you can't have too many of them when you're starting out small. What Owen just talked about is your bigger clinic, it doesn't matter. I'm going to get anybody busy because you could be a terrible physical therapist. We're going to pump you full of people. The problem with that is your retention's crap. And we can see that in notes, or we can see that in different data points that we're going to see. And if we see that retention's bad, then okay, like at the end of the day, like then we need to make a hiring switch. But
Yeah.
the reality of physical therapy is, if you're a deadbeat PT, one, you're probably not listening to this. You're probably not offended anyway. And two is, if you are listening to this and you're a deadbeat PT, you're probably landing somewhere, just because ultimately what's going to end up happening is, um, there's such a shortage of physical therapists. You'll go work at a physician-owned clinic that'll pump you full of
Yeah.
people.
Well,
So
and
there's,
you as the owner want to create that culture. You need to create that culture. And if you're not doing it, you're hurting your own bank account.
yeah, for sure.
Because like we talked, that delta is so small that there's nothing stopping somebody from just leaving and going down the street, right? Um, and if all they care about is how much they're getting per hour, when they get to clock in, when they get to clock out, and how much does it take to do my notes. But if you can really invest in them and make them say like, yo, my manager's awesome, my owner's awesome, they're doing it the right way. I always come back to you create culture by instilling purpose, right? So this comes from the owner. The owner has to say, I started this because I saw this and I was so pissed off that I started my own company, right? And then you as the owner, typically for the first 5 or something years, you're instilling that purpose into every conversation you talk to. You hire a new patient or a new PT, this is why we do it. But then you have to obviously teach your regional directors or your directors how to do that. And I laugh at it because maybe only like 5% of people get this normally, but things like accountability, things like, giving feedback appropriately, recognizing people, all the little parts that make up good leadership. I'd probably say, I mean, I don't know what number you put on it, but I'd say maybe 5% of people could do that naturally, right?
Yeah,
You have to, as the owner, instill that. And typically, if you start a business and it's successful, you have that, but you have to then learn how to make sure everyone feels that.
totally. And I think that's the part that, listen, then what you do is you're creating, as a leader, you're creating a mission that people want to work for and follow, right? And people are
Hmm.
excited about that. And people are like, I want to play for these people and I want to work for this and this is where I want to be and I can't wait to show up to work every day. Oh,
Yeah,
like I get excited to show up and banter. Like I like we had a guy who his flight got canceled yesterday. And one of the other
yeah,
clinics was like, I'm mad at you because like, and I know what really was happening. She's like, I'm mad at you because like she really wanted to, like they enjoy one another company. And like
yeah,
that's the thing that's like the whole purpose of this is to enjoy getting patients better, enjoy working with other people. That's how you're going to win if you're a small practice in here. Is like, yeah, man, like we're gonna have fun and we're gonna enjoy this and like we're gonna like I don't want to have to worry about showing up to work every day and hate my life. That is not why I
Yeah.
chose this profession. If I wanted to do that, there's plenty of corporate jobs that pay way more that you can do that in. You know what I mean? And that's the
Yeah.
reality situation. So,
Well,
uh,
let's say you have one of those negative Nancy's, right?
yeah,
Okay, you made a bad hire. We've gone through four hiring podcasts with Physio Growth, and we got our person, and then a year into it, you realize, holy crap, this is a bad decision, right? Like you have to keep culture in mind, right? And we've talked about it on other podcasts, but like having those coaching points, we could do a whole other podcast on what to do with problem employees. So we're not gonna go into that here. But I want to really hit home how important it is to cut out a bad employee, right? Or at
yeah,
least make it obvious to others that the behavior is unacceptable,
yeah.
right? So that's something I think that is the side that nobody wants to do, right? We want to do the rah rah, we want to do the hey, we're the sports clinic and we treat all these people. But I think really, truly great leaders are ones that will also see, okay, this person's slacking, and my star player is realizing this. And we have to figure out how to not just correct the action, but make sure we don't get collateral damage with the star player thinking that. So, like, I I think that it's a point I don't want to miss before we as we talk about culture. It's hopefully something that you get less and less of as you get better at hiring, but it is something that you will create this, you did all the culture stuff, you did all the books, the learning and all that stuff. But if you are kind of a wuss at having crucial conversations, one bad apple spoils the bunch, man. Like you'll still end up in the same spot of trying to hire a bunch of people if you just let the slacker stay on because you're worried about hiring again.
Honestly, one of the things that I think is massive, and it's why I have focused again for those listening to this hiring podcast, like this hiring series. One thing that I realize have recognized, and not that we have to end on this, but this is something I would think would sum us up is the thing about physical therapy is there's not enough like the demand from, and let's just use the United States in general. The demand from the United States for physical therapy is very, very high, and there's not enough of us to serve those people. And so the reality of the situation of what you're seeing is going on is the reason you have bad apples in situations, and when you see bad clinics and people who are involved in that, the reality of why it's able to exist is because, quite frankly, people are willing to accept that. The bar is not that high in creating a really good patient experience where
Mhm.
people can grow practice. It just really isn't.
Yeah.
Um, and so there's just a very disruptible aspect of this right now. On the flip side, like the idea behind getting a hiring funnel where you have lots and lots of PTs, like, I was talking about this with some of the partners, and there's almost this undertone of, well, what if we overstaff? Well, then we'll just get rid of somebody. And if you're the
Mhm.
bad apple, like, guess who you're
You're
getting rid of?
first.
And the
Yeah.
reality is what we're talking about, like, again, and I'm just going to read some of these pieces that we have on our notes here. If you're a physical therapist within an organization that's creating culture, has awesome recognition, provides great feedback, is autonomous, right? Holds themselves accountable and is a leader, like I got news for you. You're not getting fired from any company, regardless,
No.
because what's happening is you're contributing to the culture and building the practice. And so ultimately, we've all worked with physical therapists who are the exact opposite of those things. Well, what I have found is those C and D players frustrate the A's and B's. And so the reality is to cut them out makes a lot more sense. And so we've actually gotten in a situation, um, where I was faced to do that. And what ends up happening is you hold those people accountable. Generally, they quit, and that's what ended up
Yeah.
happening. I
Yep.
just wish that I had fired them earlier, personally. Like
Yeah.
because and by the way, let me talk about some real tactical numbers real fast for those in the game. So let's use it. Let's say that the national average for people being seen for PT is somewhere between 10 and 12, right? Let's call it 10 to make it easy. All
Yeah.
right, so it's 10. Well, what ends up happening is, say I got 20 of IEs coming through the door, but so and so is a bad apple, and that's going to carry over into patients. And so typically the metric you can say is like, well, do I have a bad apple on my hands? I don't know. Well, then what you're going to do is you're going to look at the metrics around how many average, visits that person sees per IE. And if it's hovering around six, I got news for you, there's your bad apple. And there's a
Yeah.
two-part problem with that. Not only are they leaving 40% of the revenue that you should be retaining in that low end of 10 visits, also what's happening is they're gobbling up the most evals because they're discharging people faster. So the problem is your bad apple is seeing more new patients and they're getting rid of them faster because they're
They're the
pushing
face of
them
your
off.
company.
The
Yeah.
face, so now they've become the face of your company. So that's why it's so important to get rid of these guys because they will slam the brakes on
Mhm.
certain people, and particularly the smaller you are, the worse it gets. And again,
Yeah.
so anyway, go ahead. I just rambled.
We always ran a 1, 2, 3 report, we called it. And it was basically how many patients only had 1, 2, or 3 visits because, at about the third or fourth visit is when they make the decision if they're going to continue, right? They'll say, okay, first time has to be a really bad experience for them to never come back, right? Second
Yeah,
time, okay, kind of confirming that this was a bad experience. Third time, yep, absolutely, this was terrible. I'm not coming back, right? And so we would run that, and it's sometimes like if somebody's at like an 8 or a 9 when everyone else is at like a 10 or 11, but they're way more experienced, right? Then okay, maybe they're just a little bit better at getting people better faster, or they have an issue where maybe they, switch to 1 time a week a little earlier than the others, right? But if the 1, 2, 3 report's high, then like people they just don't vibe with them, right?
yeah,
So anyway, that is where we say like you have to cut it out to preserve the culture, right? And I think this is the competitive advantage that we have against the hospitals, that we have against the big chains. The leader, the one who is the most passionate, the one who is like, this is what I, you know, dream about at night, right? Is also the one in the clinic, right?
for sure.
And so if you're a good leader and you can, internalize some of the stuff about leadership, then you're going to retain people a lot better. Because I mean, everyone's like, oh, hospital pays more and all that stuff. It's a $10,000 difference, right?
Totally,
So $6,000 after taxes. Now, again, not nothing, right? 3% raise each year. Yes, okay, it's a cushier job in a hospital, but it is working in the most sterilized environment almost always. The rehab director reports to the CEO of this and blah blah blah. Nobody gives a crap, right? If you work in a private practice where the owner really cares, that is a fun ass place to work,
totally.
right? So that is your competitive advantage is if you're an owner listening to this, is that you could really have a huge impact on their day-to-day life. If you can't give them the money. So if anybody's like, I can't pay the money and that's why it's this, and that, no, it's not. It's just because you don't know how to lead yet. But that's fine.
100%.
You'll get there. Yeah.
Totally, totally agree.
And
Cool.
you'll get there and you'll get better at it if no
Ah,
ad
he's got
read.
nice, nice. This is we teach this stuff in physiogrowth.com,
I'm telling you.
physio-growth.com. So check it out. I love it.
Physio-growth.com. We
Nah,
have
look
a
at that. That was
mentor.
like that was. I should you alley-ooped me, and I was so shocked. I was like, it was so good of an alley-oop. I didn't even know how to dunk it. It was perfectly done. So
Well,
yeah.
the problem is I'm if anyone's watching this on YouTube, I am in a hotel room. I'm away treating a client, and I have been listening to podcasts and watching YouTube videos. So I have
Nice.
been getting ad reads all the time. So
Getting
now it's just
seasoned.
like ingrained in me.
That's so
But
funny.
yeah, live Q&A sessions. We had someone avoid a massive hiring mistake. We have another girl who is made 2 great hires in a cash practice. And we have someone who is, I think he's going to crush it, dude. Like I'm really excited to see where he goes with it. But
Yeah.
those are just some of the people that we're helping in the Q&A session. So $100 a month, get in there,
By the
learn
way,
some stuff.
another key piece is not just cash-based physical therapist. The guy that Owen just talked about is looking. He's opening up an insurance-based clinic, and we were talking about we're like he's gonna
Oh,
smash.
he's going toe to toe with the health systems and
It's
he's
so
hungry.
exactly, and he's
He
got the
wants
right
he wants
attitude.
to punch him in the face.
Exactly, he's so pumped. So anyway, so by the way, this is also if you're in an insurance game and you're like, I want to do that, like by all means, like jump in. This is what I do, and that we do the
Yeah.
cash-based stuff. So all day
We
long.
have hybrid practices too. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. So we can
Yeah.
make it all. So
Cool. All right.
cool.
Physio-growth.com. Hit us up.
Do it.
Brian, we are out.
See ya.
Yeah.